Here's the question. What's going on inside the minds of top achievers that cause them to make extraordinary breakthroughs both personally and professionally? My name is Tim Shurr, and I invite you to join me as we take a deep dive into the unconscious mind and discover how to transform your biggest dreams into a reality. Welcome to the How to Be Mesmerizing podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and I've got a special treat for you. I've brought my buddy in, David Horsager, with us. David, welcome to the show.
Tim, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So David is the foremost authority on building trust in corporate America, which he's got his hands full, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's no shortage of trust issues in our world today.
Yeah, for sure. So you are really the authority on building trust, and especially with teams, high-performing leaders. And you wrote the book on it, Trusted Leader. I'm so excited that you're here with us today to share your insights. You know, I think it was 2019, the Edelman Trust Barometer was sent out, and to all kinds of industries, all sectors, with the message of, do we trust our leaders? And they said that 63% of people do not trust their boss. So I'm sure you found that in your research as well.
Well, by the way, that's not bad, because institutional trust is down steeply, and we put out a big study every year too. Edelman probably puts the biggest, they're out of the UK, a significant global study. We have a global study, a significant in its space, called Trust Outlook. If anybody wants the free research, they can go to trustoutlook.com, and there's a white paper every year. I love what Edelman does, though. That finding, if you look at institutional trust, just to jump a little bit here, before Watergate, there about in 1960s, about 80% of Americans on the U.S. side trusted government to do what's right. Now it's something like 6 or 7%. So institutional trust, not just leadership trust, but institutional trust is down steeply. Where we used to trust big food, now we want the food grown right next to us. Where people used to, they still actually, the same number of people say they believe in God, and yet any metric that would show it, going to a house of worship, giving, is down steeply. So even education, because of this lack of institutional trust, all of a sudden homeschools, charter schools, all that is up steeply. And yet, to your point on the research, our study keeps finding number one reason people want to work for an organization, number one, ahead of being paid more, ahead of a more fun work environment or more autonomy, number one, they want to trust their leadership. They want to work for trusted leadership. And so what we keep, we find people want to, we've been doing this research, I started my grad work almost 2 decades ago, and the first book, The Trust Edge, a lot of that was in there. And then some of the other books, this new book really makes it, the Trusted Leader makes it applicable. You can use it tomorrow morning in your home, your work. But basically what we found is people want to either be a leader they can trust, or they want to follow a trusted leader. And some people think, well, isn't trust something you have or you don't? Turns out you can actually really do something about it every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like every day it's kind of like you have a trust bank account. And if you're not intentionally making deposits, then you're probably making withdrawals or bouncing checks.
It's possible, that's for sure. And to go to that point, I would say, I have more conviction than ever, especially after the last few years of research, that trust is always the leading indicator. Everything else lags. So if you take any industry, leadership, first of all, the reason I follow a leader, people say, oh, I want to be around people I like. That might be true, but I got friends I like a whole lot that I wouldn't go into business with for a million years. Because the question people is asking is not, do I like you? We buy from people we like. No, we don't. We buy from people we trust. The question everybody's asking about you and me is, can I trust you? Whether it's an audience or a colleague or friend or partner or whatever. And so the leading indicator, so the reason I follow a lead or not is trust. The reason I buy or not, unless it's a commodity, is trust. The only way to amplify a marketing message is increase trust in the message. The only way to increase innovation on a team is increase trust in the team so they share ideas. The only way to increase learning is increase trust either in the content, the teacher, or the psychological safety, the trust of the room. the only way to deal with the diversity issues of our day. I mean, the biggest Harvard Putnam study shows diversity on its own pits people against each other, unless you increase trust. And then you get the great benefits of diversity, inclusion, equity, but only then. So we often focus on the wrong thing. And this is what we kept finding is people are not dealing with the real issue. Trust is always the root issue. When we focus on that, we start to actually get lower attrition, retention, higher sales, whatever it is we want.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying, and you're absolutely right. How can you have people that are engaged, that are collaborative, that are productive, that are focused on, contributing in a bigger way and adding that kind of value, if you don't trust the person next to you, if you don't trust your supervisor, if you don't trust the other departments, if there's silos in your department and you have these mini kingdoms set up, which happens all the time.
To that point, we kept, people say we got engagement issues, and they might show up as engagement issues, but once again, you don't get engagement. With engagement, the only way is to increase trust. We don't get the net promoter score is a good question, referrals, but our study kept showing people don't get referrals with referrals. The only way to get more referrals, increase your net promoter score, is increase trust. So now, this is my whole, I hope without ego, but a whole lot of passion, and work on 6 continents now with global governments and corruption issues and some of the biggest, sports teams and businesses is if people can just shift thinking. Like even me, I thought I knew it all about trust, did grad work. Oh, trust is just this or that. It's just integrity. No, it's not. It's way more, it's more complex than you think. I mean, people say trust, it's just transparency. It's just vulnerability. Huh? Some of your kids are so transparent on social media, I don't trust them for a second, right? So it's also confidentiality. I mean, it takes a long time to build trust. Well, in a moment of crisis, complete strangers can trust each other like that if they're running the same direction. So it's just different and bigger and more significant than people think. And there is a framework, a way to build it.
I love how you're busting those trust myths one after another, because we have all these ideas and you're like, nope, that's not accurate. Nope. And
that's what you go after. You go after pulling the deception out of people's heads, right? I mean, we gotta shift thinking like you do to get anywhere. First, we have to shift our thinking about things. And you're the expert on that, but we have to do it about trust.
So what's your first step in getting people to trust? So if you're working with the New York Yankees or you're working with a foreign government, very impressive, all these cool things you do. How do you start to get people to trust each other, David?
Yeah. Well, okay. So first of all, they have to shift thinking they have to see the case for trust, that it's bigger and more, more important than they think. That's the why. But then the way or the how, actually, they have to understand the 8-pillar framework, because it could be any one of these 8. So now I could talk about each of these all day. We can't cover them in the podcast maybe, but maybe I should, just for context, give all 8 quick. Do we have time to do that in 3 minutes?
Well, I'll make time.
Okay. So basically, because you could start with any one, they were relatively co-equal in the research, but what we found is these 8, and this framework was just revalidated last year by an outside university as the way trust is built globally. And they're denoted by C words, like kind of the bucket of research is, but that doesn't mean it's some kind of floofy motivational whatever. It's a framework from research. So I'll give them quickly. You need to understand there's so much more to each of these. And, in Trusted Leader, the new book, there's under each of these 8 pillars of trust, there's a way you can apply it tomorrow morning as a leader with your family. We've had people say it tripled their sales. We've had people say it saved their marriage. So you can use it personally or professionally, but there's actionable tools. But let me, for context, give the 8, and then we can maybe answer those questions a little better. So here we go. 8 pillars of trust. First, clarity. People trust the clear, and they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. So whenever you overcomplexify something beyond what is needed, you lose clarity, which loses trust. I mean, think about this in our government today. The average bill that goes through Congress is over 1,200 pages. Nobody knows what it's in it. It's so unclear. 50 years ago, it used to be 2.5 pages. Okay, I trust you. We have the right intent. Okay, let's go. Now it takes forever. Why? We got to go through this whole thing, right? Yeah. Clarity. Number 2 is compassion. We trust those that care beyond themselves. This is why the most trusted person in the world to the most people is not Oprah or Denzel or even the Pope. It is actually mom, because she generally, there are some crazies, but she sacrifices, she cares beyond herself. We could learn something from mom. It's not a soft skill. It is a bottom line issue, to care, actually show compassion. We have ways we teach doing that. The next pillar is character. Of course, we thought this would be important. Talking about trust, got to have character. I used to be an ethics professor. It's important. We noticed that people that build trust, they do what's right over what's easy. And we have a framework for building high character companies. Many companies, frankly, are incentivized through their sales program or whatever against the very character they say they want to have. I mean,
Yes,
you think of
I've
some of
seen
the corruption issues we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Until we change a police officer about bribery, we can't change a country, you know? So anyway, but that's not everything, because let's go to the fourth pillar, which is competency. So for this very reason, I might trust Tim Shurr to take my kids to the ball game because he's compassionate. He's got character. That doesn't mean I will trust Tim to give me a root canal, right? Because of competency. So in the way you want to be trusted, you have to be capable and competent, you know?
Yes.
And so there's ways to keep building that. And, you know, if you're selling the way you were 20 years ago, I don't trust you. If you're leading the way you were 10 years ago, I don't trust you. We've got to keep, you know, being competent and capable. Next pillar is commitment. We trust those that stay committed in the face of adversity. We can come back to this one. We want to talk about the key to rebuilding trust, but basically, this commitment pillar is really critical. You think of people who have left a legacy in history or life, from Mandela, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Jesus, or Joan of Arc, and you'll find someone that was trusted partly because they were committed to something beyond themselves, often to death, right? So next pillar is something you talked about earlier, and we call it the connection pillar as far as that funnel of research. This is, you know, a counterforce. There's counterforces to each of these pillars. If I go into an organization, I see siloing. You said that. I see unwillingness to share the budget on one printer, so we got to each have one or something. You know, we know we have a lack of connection, collaboration, and that's leads to a lack of trust, which always affects cost. Yes. And by the way, I can come back to it later, but trust always affects cost. A lack of trust always is the biggest expense. So I can kind of prove that out. But the next pillar is contribution. That's the seventh pillar. And the number one word that kind of came out of this research funnel was results. We trust those that contribute results. You can't just have compassion, character. If you don't give the results I expect or ask for, we got a problem, right? Yeah. You've got to deliver results. So you can be that doctor that's compassionate, but in amputation cuts off the wrong leg. We got a problem. I don't trust you. So final pillar is consistency, and that's sameness. Sameness is trusted. You know, this is why even if I don't like McDonald's, I trust them. I've had the same burger on 6 continents. It's the pickle's off standard wherever I go, right? So this is why, by the way, for good or bad, if you're late all the time, I will in fact trust you to be late. So consistency is trust. So you have these 8. So I believe, and I, you know, if we had more time, we'd go deeper into this, but just so people have context, if they write these 8 down, they can solve their biggest organizational leadership, sales, family issues against these 8. It's always a fundamental issue of one of these 8, how we think about these 8. So if we can frame it, so first thing I want to do is show them, get the common language when you asked the question way earlier, because if they can define it here, they can get to the root issue. As an example, people say, like I said before, it's an engagement issue. No, it's not. It's one of these, or a multitude. It's not even people say, okay, what about communication? Isn't it ever a communication? I mean, everybody says it's a communication issue. And the truth is, of course, it never is. Communication's happening all the time. Clear, take the pillars. Clear communication is trusted. Unclear isn't. Compassionate is. Hateful isn't. Consistent is. Inconsistent isn't. So you can at least start by having the language. Then, of course, we can go to, you know, to tools, takeaways, and strategies under each of these of how I can actually apply those 8. So I wanted this to be more of a conversation, but I got to get those 8 out because that's the core.
Oh, it's brilliant. I love it. I love it. I mean, that's amazing. And you're so, I mean, this is really, I mean, okay. So it's obvious why you are like the country's #1 expert on trust, right? Because you have broken it down and you have recognized, and you're trying to get it out into the world, that the reason that so many people struggle is because they're trying to solve the wrong problem. And I've been yelling that from the mountaintops as well. You know, the goal is X, Y is what you think the problem is, but Z is the real issue. And nobody's dealing with Z, right? Yeah. So like you said, you know, we're always trying to improve our communication, but if you focus on these 8 pillars of trust, the communication will clear up naturally. It will become more effective. It will become more clear because you have clarity, compassion, character, competency, commitment, connection, contribution, and consistency. Boom. Drop the trust mic. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's circle back to some of the other points that you had mentioned, circling back to. Okay. So let's talk about trust and cost.
Okay.
So what's it costing companies not to have people trust each other or their leaders?
Sure. Well, first of all, without going deep on research, you can do it through an analogy almost, like a lock, right? A lock is a good representation of a lack of trust, because the only reason I put a lock on anything is I don't trust you. So what is the cost of putting a lock on the gate?
Yeah.
Well, there are two big costs. One, I got to buy the lock. That's money.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest cost is time. Now I got to open it every time I go through. So you have this huge cost. But actually what we found is there's more. Every time, when I started my grad work, I was just looking at what's unique about the most successful leaders and organizations of all time, and it kept coming back, trust. And I noticed, okay, how do we move attrition? Well, we increase trust. How do we move this time to market? Well, if we increase trust, wow, the time speeds up. It's everything was affected by trust. So maybe even another simple way, at least one in our short time, is like, okay, just simply text someone you trust. How long does that take? Whoop, it's done. Now try to text someone you don't trust. How long does that take? How long? I don't. How are they going to take this? Right? It takes forever. So you can, even without all the research that certainly can go back and look at Trust Edge and or look at our Trust Outlook white papers or everything else. But you can simply start to see that trust actually affects costs more than anything else. So if you can hit that leading indicator of trust, then you actually start to get what you wanted: more sales, a better relationship with your 17-year-old daughter, whatever.
That's so good. All right. So real quick, what's your website again for Trust Edge white papers? How do they find those Trust Edge white papers?
So the white papers, you can always go through trustedge.com. That's an easy one. And you can look at the Institute. You can look at research there. But Trust Outlook directly takes you to the Trust Outlook, which is our annual white paper.
Yeah.
And then for
amazing cutting edge assessments as well for trust, right?
Lots of them. And actually for you, and we prompt this week, because this is launch week for Trusted Leader. Scratch the word "the" there, just like Facebook. Throw out the, it's just Trusted Leader. That's the book, Trusted Leader by David Horsager. And it's but if you go to trustedleaderbook.com, then right now for this week, there's a couple links. You don't even have to buy the book. You can go to but you do have to sign up. There's an amazing webcast we created and produced beautifully. I'm interviewing the legendary lady that created the trust culture at Southwest, and this FBI special agent that behavioral analysis worked in Russian counterintelligence on trust. And then I share a lot of the key takeaways under each of these pillars of what you can do tomorrow. I share the simple idea I used to lose 52 pounds in 5 months. It's right in there. So you can go there, and then if you do get a book, you can have the whole 72 video masterclass, Trust Edge masterclass, and a whole lot more if you'd like it. But you mentioned assessments. You can get the self-assessment for free, a whole lot of things there. If you just go to trustedleaderbook.com, and you can go to the webcast for free. If you get a book, you can get some assessments. And we do, out of the Institute, we have 6 ways we assess trust in organizations. So if you want to know the big enterprise trust index or some of the ways we're assessing trust globally or significantly, we can help you with that, because when you can measure it, then you can close a gap, and then you can really help lead to significant results. So any of those ways, if you have a hard time finding them, come visit us at trustedge.com. We'll get you to the right place. And thank you for being a trusted friend in all this.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I'm going there right after our program. This is extraordinary. I'm excited to share this and get this out in a bigger way, because it's what we all need. And heck, if I can build trust and we're going to lose weight at the same time, come on. I mean, that's
TrustedLeaderBook.com for that free webcast. So that's just special this week with the launch.
So everybody check that out, because it's amazing the way that it's set up too, where you can spend, I don't know, $20-$30 on a book, and then you get thousands of dollars worth of free resources. It's amazing how that.
We used to charge thousands for that, and now this week it's like, boom, here it is.
I know. Yeah. It's that people expect it. It's a weird thing. I buy a book and I get all these resources. So definitely, that's awesome. All right, now you had mentioned if we break trust, people always say it takes years to build trust and it takes seconds to break it. So if something happens, how do you start to rebuild it?
Okay, so two quick answers. One is, yes, we have a 10-step process if you're a big company that just had an oil spill and you've got to deal with it in massive ways. But I'm going to say this for everybody. Whether you're a big company or an individual, it comes down to one thing, and it is not the apology. People want to think it's the apology, and so simple. And it's not that it's so hard. It's just you never, ever, ever rebuild trust on the apology. I'm not saying you don't need to apologize to open the door and connect again. You might need to start there, but that doesn't rebuild trust. So I'll tell you through a true story. A friend of mine became a friend. He's a CEO. He came from the Netherlands, came over to America. He'd been here a couple weeks. I said, hey, what's the first thing you notice in America? He said, you want to know the truth, David? I said, yeah. He said, in America, you got a bunch of lying apologizers. They all say they're sorry all the time, and they don't mean it. This guy that works for me now, he said, this is his company, he said, over here, he said, I'm sorry I'm late, but he's late every single day. He says, I'm sorry I'm late every day. Yeah. So the bottom line is, I'm not saying don't apologize, because to open our communication and everything, an apology can open the door for the truth. But the only way to rebuild trust, is to make and keep a new commitment. It's the only way. So, and by the way, you do this a lot. You talk about trusting yourself a lot, or kind of mindsets, right? So, there's a big problem here. We all hear the idea, maybe you've heard it, love your neighbor as yourself, which kind of shows, if you don't love yourself at all, you have a hard time loving others. And that's true. Find someone that doesn't love themselves at all. They have a hard time loving others. But it's the same with trust. If you don't trust yourself at all, you'll have a hard time building it on your team, building it with others. You're skeptical and suspicious of everybody else because you don't trust yourself. Now, what's the number one way or reason you don't trust yourself? There's a few ways. What people said about you as a kid, who knows, a lot of things. But one reason you don't trust yourself is when you don't make and keep commitments to yourself. And so stop making, I would say everybody, stop making commitments right now that you're not going to keep. Yeah. And to that weight loss story, this isn't the way I lost the weight. Okay. So that's in the book, the Clarity Method, and it's in that webcast. But I'll tell you one little side note that's not in there, and that is about commitments. This is before I was, this is a decade ago. I didn't have much money or whatever, and I made this commitment in front of my staff. I said, if I am not my high school weight by May 1st, I'll give you $2,500, And my wife's like, what are you doing, And what I knew, when I make a commitment, it's a big deal to me. Yeah. And number two, what I knew is not keeping that commitment is the worst thing. Isn't the $2,500 per employee? The worst thing is that I lose trust in myself, and that's way worse. And that's the big problem. So, but when you make and keep commitments like that, they're a little challenging. Oh, you trust yourself more. You think others can be trustworthy. And of course, the big problem with all this is people can actually manipulate these pillars to appear trusted without actually being worthy of it. What we're really going for, is trustworthiness. That's, what we hope for. Authentic trust.
Yes. Well, I love that. I mean, you are, again, absolutely correct. If you make a mistake and then you apologize and then you don't set any commitments that you follow through on to rebuild trust, you are really dead in the water, because now people don't even trust your apologies. You got nothing left.
And this doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, by the way. I'll just say right here, I'm not perfect at any things I teach about trust. My team knows I'm not perfect at any of this stuff. I just know it's true from the research. It doesn't mean I won't have to make another apology. I'm going to make more mistakes. But if you apologize only, you don't rebuild trust on that.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge, because a lot of times too, if you're doing that, you'll apologize and people say, well, I don't trust your apology. And now we understand why. And so, and then people are like, well, I guess you'll just have to get over it. Right. But that's not what we do. What we do is we say, well, all right, let's set up a commitment that I can then follow through on to rebuild that trust. So, show up on time, tell you I'm going to call you at 2:00, and then I call you at 2:00.
For this very reason, people say to me, David, they'll come see me and do a keynote or whatever, and they'll say, "I love that trust stuff. That's so. I want to trust this guy again. I want to trust. I'm going to start trusting more." I'm like, no, that's not what I said. Yeah, you should trust them for what they did last time.
Mm-hmm.
You trust people for what they do. So yeah, if that guy did this to you last time, trust that he'll do that again. So don't just, this isn't blind trust. This is a framework for becoming most trusted and for wisely building trust. When you build trust, when I build trust, I get the greatest advantage of all time, personally and professionally, I think, and that is this thing we call the trust edge. I mean, the other problem I see at keynotes is I'm back signing books like you do, and we're back there, and people say, I love that stuff. Boy, my boss needed that. They should have been here today.
Yeah.
My 17-year-old needs this stuff. My
heard
spouse needs this. And the problem is they're not here. You're here and I'm here.
Yeah.
And we can do something about this. And organizations don't change. Only individuals do. But when an individual does, then a family, a community, a country can change. So why don't you and I just start here?
Start here. Grassroots. That's right. Yeah. I always believe the person that needed to be in the room to hear that message was. And
I learn every time I speak it myself. And, so I'm changed by, that's why I'm so passionate about it is, yes, I've seen companies and countries change. Yes, I see the research every year. But this has changed me as a parent, as a spouse, and as a friend.
Well, it's the only way that you can get better and why you personally have been so successful because, you're so authentic in that way and people feel your passion and because you're constantly turning it inward and trying to, make yourself better with it. And that's the best way to do it, right? Is to drink your own medicine
Yep.
and show that it actually works and it's healing and it's not just theoretical and from the research that when applied, it actually does improve your relationships. And that's where it's at. Yeah. A lot of times people will say that, well, I'm just being stupid or a fool if I'm trusting people that are always, going to let you down. And so I've always said, well, you've allowed them to make you a mistrusting person, right? You can be a trusting person. You just don't have to lend them money. Right. Yeah. Or people will say, well, I trust you. I used to hear this a lot in group settings, I'll trust you until you give me reason not to. That sounds like a mistrusting statement. What do you think about that statement?
Well, it's kind of like Reagan said, right? Trust but verify.
Yeah.
It's interesting. This might be a little jump, but basically in last year's study, it's interesting. So in America, on the American side, so it's a global study, but on the U.S. side, about half of Americans said they lead with trust. Like, in other words, they trust until you break it.
Yeah.
And about half of Americans lead with suspicion and skepticism, and you have to build it from day one, right?
Yes.
And so people can quickly judge that, but it really doesn't matter. For you and I as leaders, we have to act the same way either way. Either group doesn't matter. We have to build trust every day. So whether they lead with suspicion or they lead with trust, and you and I need to build these pillars either way. And frankly, this side over here that leads with skepticism, before we judge them too much, for me, I am on this other side. I've trusted people too much. I've lost money because of it and all kinds of things. Why? Partly because I grew up in a safe, relatively healthy environment with loving parents and all that. It wasn't my fault that I got to have great parents, right? Same with this other group over here. Many of them, before they were 20 years old, that lead with suspicion and skepticism, had something pretty tragic happen, mistrusting happen. And that, by true, also wasn't their fault. So at 6 years old, this terrible thing happened to this girl. At 10 years old, this terrible thing happened. And so they lead with those things for a reason. So people want to start getting into the weeds on that. And for those of us that are trying to lead for good and make a positive impact, actually, it doesn't matter too much. We have to build these pillars in our own lives, our own businesses, our own countries. And that helps either side, whether people lead with trust or lead with skepticism.
Yeah, that's so powerful. It's such a powerful revelation. And it just goes back to, instead of focusing on what everybody else is doing, focus on what you're doing. And it doesn't matter what shows up or who shows up. What matters is how you show up. Yep. Oh, that's so good. So David, where can people find your book and your resources again?
Right now this week, www.trustedleaderbook.com. If you can spell my name, you can go to davidhorsager.com. You can go to trustedge.com for all kinds of other things and resources and see in my, how many hundreds of videos on YouTube and everything else. But trustedleaderbook.com, that's where you get all these resources. You can grab the book, but you can also, whether you get it or not, it's a really amazing masterclass webcast you can have for free and some other things. And that web, just go there. You'll find it.
It really gives you practical tools that you can use immediately to start building more trust in yourself and with others. It gives you a clear map, right, to follow, because otherwise, when you say build trust, most people have a deer in the headlights, right?
And just to say it, those watching, I have the pre-release copies. So just like the other book, our design is really cool. I'll show, most people will be listening, but the first half, in this case, is a quick story to shift thinking about trust. The second half is application that has takeaways they can use tomorrow morning. So little story to shift that thinking about trust. Second half, action, you can use it tomorrow to build.
The parable is great because everybody can, especially now with the pandemic, can relate to, hey, things were really going great. I was primed to take off, and then all of a sudden got knocked on my butt, and this is not where I wanted to be. And then, of course, how I pivoted. And that's, of course, what everybody wants to hear. How did you pivot? How'd you make that comeback? And then to be able to give the roadmap for building trust. Because I really don't know what's more important than loving yourself and building trust in yourself and others. I don't know what's more important than that. That is the foundation of everything else. If you're not focusing on that, you're building your house and your company on sand. So, David, what an amazing episode this was. So many amazing takeaways and tools and tips and strategies. I know you've got a big event that's coming up right after this interview. So thank you so much for making time in your schedule and for writing this book and for dedicating your life to helping our world trust each other a little bit more. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. So great to be here.
All right, everybody. Holy cow. Wow. So get that book, go to trustedleaderbook.com and get David's book, get the videos and the masterclass and all those resources, and check out the Trust Edge white paper. You can find all those resources there. And because they're just extraordinary tools. And from what you've heard, you should be able to start using this today. So apply what you've learned, make your life mesmerizing. We'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody. Hey, it's Tim. You ever wonder why so many talented, hardworking entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with inconsistent self-belief or high stress or procrastination or self-sabotage? Well, the answer may surprise you, and the solution is already inside of you. I've been searching for the answers to this for decades, and I found them, and I put it into a new program called The Power of Your Unconscious Mind, Mental Secrets for Accelerating Success. And because you're a listener, I want to give you a free VIP copy. Head over to powermindsetprogram.com. That's powermindsetprogram.com and grab your copy today.